because we want to gauge our emotions. So I believe that we still have our jotters with us. So just pick up your jotter and your pen. And I have 2 questions for you. You're going to show your answer to your spouse. The first question, please go to the next slide. What emotion are you feeling right now? How do you feel right now? Just write it down. Are you feeling happy, excited, sad, angry? Are you feeling numb? Just write it down, whatever comes to your mind. Have we done that? So once you have written it, you can show it to your spouse. Okay, so some people have done that already. Okay, thank you for showing me. He wrote happy. Okay, that's good. Awesome.
I just touched her now. I wanted to know if she felt good.
Thank you. Yes, I feel good. All right, so that's the first thing. The second question I want us to answer is, within the last 2 weeks, how stressful do you think your life has been? On a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 stands for little or no stress, and 10 stands for so much stress. So there's something that we call the Likert scale. So from 1 to 10, so 1 is little or no stress, and so it increases till it now gets to that height of 10. So write down your answer. Your spouse should write his or her answer as well, then you exchange. How stressful has your life been? It's a self-assessment. Some people are not writing. Okay, are we done with that? Okay, so show it to your spouse. And maybe you might need to ask. If someone had 7 over 10 and above, that's a sign of is a high perception of stress. If what you wrote down was between 1 to 4 or 1 to 2, that's a low perception. And then between 5 and 4, 5, 6 is moderate perception. So the way you feel about the pressure that you are getting at any point in time is really what matters. Some person might see you going through something and feel that it's stressful for you, but you don't feel stressed. But it's going to be stressful for another person. Okay, so that's just a little exercise I wanted us to engage in. Let's look at our learning points for today. We want to understand the nature of stress, and we want to understand how it affects our productivity, our potential, and our purpose. We also want to look at the lifestyle tools, because that's what we're really going to be leveraging on. One of the things we must realize is that stress is inevitable. It's one of the major attacks to our mental health. And we'll see what it generates into later. So we'll look at the intentional steps to enhance healthy emotions. You know, sometimes we feel irritated. You can be in a place, maybe somebody wrote irritated today. You can feel irritated. But that emotion, even though it doesn't seem like a positive emotion, is actually a protective emotion. Because if you feel irritated by something that is, if you were giving food this morning and the plate was dirty, but the food is good, you feel irritated, like, that irritation will protect you so that you won't eat that food and get something contaminated into your system. The same thing with anger. Many of us talk about holy anger. Even though the Bible says that we should not allow the sun, to set on our anger. So anger can be a protective emotion, and that's why there are protests ongoing right now, because people want to express themselves. But we must learn self-awareness and self-regulation, because if we don't learn that, that's where people now go overboard. So my husband was showing me something yesterday, how people were looting warehouses and other people's shops and all that. Yes, people are trying to express their displeasure, but they are not self-regulated, because of that stressful situation that is happening. So what does stress mean to you? It means different things to different people. So for some people, it could mean doing all the office work. You're the boss, or you're the person who is supervising, and you have to take charge. And if anything goes wrong, the ball lands in your court. Could it be doing all the house chores? But interestingly, from this picture, we can see the man assisting the woman with the house chores. Do you think that this will reduce the stress for the woman? You think so, right? I think so. Mentally, yes. For some people, it's working till late at night. For some people, stress means, what it means to them is the economic downturn. Fewer dollars in the pocket or naira. So some people have said that if somebody is looking sad, the person is looking sober, just transfer some money to the person and all of a sudden the person will become happy. Okay, so stress means different things to different people. We could have a lot of things ongoing, which we're actually seeing within our own nation. The political instability, high inflation, the fluctuations in the naira and the dollar, insecurity, poor infrastructure. All of these things signal that there is a lot of difficulty ahead. And this is why a lot of people are mentally stressed. This is why people are taking some actions that you wonder why. Just recently, I read about the former CEO of Conga now that was said to have committed suicide. And for such an individual, you feel that that person, achieved the peak of, whatever he wanted to achieve in life, maybe the potentials, he has money and all that. So why would a person of that caliber, commit suicide? So those things, they don't just happen. They don't just happen. And that's why it's important for us to care for our mental health. Even Jesus warned us. He warned us. He said, in this world you have tribulation, but be of good cheer, because he has overcome the world. Sometimes it's the environment, maybe from traffic jams, but many more times it's domestic violence. Domestic violence. And a lot of families are living, within a very stressful situation, very toxic situation. I don't know how it is for you, but I trust God that by the time each and every one of us are living here, we'll be able to say that all forms of toxicity or violence, will be free of them in Jesus' name. Sometimes it's unfriendly in-laws and neighbors, so many things. Okay, so let's define stress. Stress is how we react when we feel under pressure or when we feel threatened. It usually happens when we feel that we are in a situation that we can't, control. This thing is happening right now and I don't seem to have a control over it. That's actually when stress happens. And what are the causes? The causes are divided into internal stressors and external stressors. I've already mentioned some of the external stressors. And some of the things we mentioned were economical factors, occupational factors. We've heard of people who, within a short time of them losing something very valuable. Like there used to be a very big cold room around Abule Egba. I learned that within a few months of them taking down the building because they had to put up that bridge at that roundabout. I learned she died within maybe 8 months or so, the person that owned the cold room. So you wonder, why do these things happen? And then at other times, it might be when you are involved in something that is even enjoyable, exciting. Just a few days ago, we lost Mrs. Onyeka Owenu, and she was singing, and then she went and sat down and she slumped. And so that's one of the reasons why we're going to be looking at stress, because when we looked at some of the videos, some of the things that she talked about, you will know that one way or the other, this person must have gone through some very hard times. Of course, she coped, but what stress will do is that it's going to perpetuate underlying medical conditions. So in a moment of excitement, there can be a trigger of certain influences that will now heighten the risk of a heart attack. We have work stressors, business stressors. We have problems with the home front, parenting, relationships, financial pressures. All of these are stressors, usually external. But how about the internal stressors? Internal stressors are the ones that I've highlighted on the left, trying to please everyone. You become a yes man or a yes woman. Frustration. So it has more to do about how you feel on your inside. Two people are exposed to the same situation, but one person is just feeling frustrated, angry, overwhelmed. The other person is just roller coasting along. Of course, comparing yourself with another, even the Bible says that people that compare themselves with each other are not wise, because it will put a pressure on you. And at the end of the day, you might not be able to control yourself, and you want to do what the other person is doing. And at the end of the day, even go beyond the budgets, for the home, just because you want to buy or get or be what somebody else is. Job dissatisfaction, limiting beliefs, insecurity, fear, all these things are internal stressors. Now, let's look at this curve. This curve shows us the stress performance curve. I'm sure some of us have heard that stress can be good, right? Am I right? Can stress be good? Yes. So there's a level of stress which is actually important for us. We call it eustress. That's spelled EU. So that's the eustress. And that's where you have the optimal stress. You can see in the middle there, the yellow that you have. If you don't have enough of pressure to help you to go about your daily activities, you become demotivated, you become lazy, you become mediocre. But when you have timelines, you have goals and objectives, then it helps you. But when it now becomes overwhelming and you take on more than you should, or more comes to you from different angles than you should, then these are the different emotions that could come up. So you can see that for low level of stress, the person becomes inactive, bored, and unchallenged. I wish I had more to do. And this happened a lot during COVID-19 because people had to be cooped up in their homes. For moderate amount of stress, the person is engaged, focused, and motivated. I'm feeling focused and energized. Yes, I'm enjoying this new job. Optimal, you're confident, in control, and productive. You feel like you're really in the zone. But when that stress is becoming too high, you find yourself becoming distracted because there are too many things you're trying to focus on at the same time. You feel fatigued, you feel overwhelmed. And that is when people now begin to have anxiety because they're like, how can I meet up? How can I meet up? I have this engagement, I have this appointment, I have this bill to pay, and everything seems to be coming on at the same time. When it is too high, then that's where you now have exhaustion. You have anxiety, burnout. I can't take this anymore. When people are burnt out, that's when they have this depersonalization. They lose reality of who they are and what really matters. Maybe you need to ask your spouse this morning, what really matters to you? What matters? Ask. What really matters? In the midst of all the turmoil and all the things that we see happen, what really matters? Okay, so let's look at the symptoms of stress. I'm putting a lot of emphasis on stress because that is what will typically degenerate into anxiety, depression, and other mental illnesses. So when stress comes up and we are coping with that pressure, we have gone beyond optimal stress, these are the ways in which we know that most likely are going through stress, because some people are not emotionally intelligent enough to recognize that they are going through stress. And that's one of the things I will talk about, our emotional intelligence. So when stress affects you, it can affect your mind, the way you think. It can affect your body, the way you feel. It can affect your emotions and your behavior. So somebody behaves in a certain way. You say, that person is really stressed. So what are the symptoms? For the mind, if you find yourself constantly worrying, you're always worried about this. The children, they have gone to school. I hope nothing happens, when they're in school. I hope that the person who is supposed to bring them back comes on time. You just find yourself worrying about little things every now and then. In fact, if you find yourself worrying constantly throughout the day about several things for at least a period of 2 weeks, we call it a generalized anxiety disorder, GAD. Some people, it is just when a certain situation happens. That's when they find themselves becoming jittery and worried. So worrying, muddled thinking, you can't think straight, impaired judgment, making the wrong decisions, nightmares. In fact, there was a time in my life I was having nightmares. I didn't understand what was happening. And I would wake up, with a panic, and I will be panting, my heart will be beating very fast. At that point in time in my life, I didn't realize that I was going through a lot of stress. There was a lot of pressure. But I thought I was coping. But at some point, I even had to talk to a psychiatrist that, what's happening with me? At a point, I thought it was a spiritual attack. My husband will pray for me, prophesy over my life, read scriptures. I thank God I eventually got over it, but I had to look inward and I had to make some changes. Okay, so negativity is also part of the things that could affect our mind. Then how about our body? If you find yourself always having headaches, and I've had a lot of patients like that, they come to the hospital, before you come to LASUT, you would have gone to 1 or 2 places. You would have run tests. You would have used medication. So by the time the person is coming and they've done this test, I've used this drug, and I'm still having headache. I remember one encounter I had with a particular patient. Eventually, I decided to, look into his social background, asked questions about his job. I discovered that the problem was actually from his boss. And that headache will come Monday morning, just before he went to work. That's when the headache will come. But at that point in time, he was not emotionally aware or self-aware to be able to identify that as a problem. I had to identify it and then give him some cues. So if we become emotionally aware, then you will know how your body reacts. Somebody has told me before that when he's stressed, he can't sign his checkbook. The thing will just go off. So he just know, I have to put this aside and take a break. For some people, the immunity drops when you are stressed. And when your immunity drops, you find yourself having constant rashes, always having colds, always having one thing or the other. There is actually a mind-brain connection. So depending on the state of your mind, it can actually influence your body. And I remember a dermatologist also talking about that if you are able to reduce the stressful situation you are in, there are certain lesions or certain rashes that will also reduce. Lots of confidence, that's for emotions. Lots of self-esteem, feeling alienated from other people, feeling apprehensive. These are signs of stress. Becoming accident prone. You find that you're always tripping and falling into the gutter. You're always one error or the other, one mistake or the other. All those things could be due to the pressure. I wish people knew that my mental health is so physical too. And this is important for us, especially even medical practitioners. We discover that when people come to the hospital, they come with a symptom that is non-specific. Somebody could just come and say, I feel this pressure on the top of my head. I've even had people who will say that it looks as if they're fetching water on my head. And you have to listen. what happens really for some people is that when the doctor cannot make head or tail, they just say, go and do this test, go and do CT scan, go and do that, just to get the patient, away. Because there are sometimes those symptoms, they will just be confusing. But I've come to realize that many times, especially in this part of the world, those symptoms are somatic and they are well documented. So if you are able to find out what is going on, what are the stresses in that person's life, how is the person coping, that's the way in which that person is expressing the stress, because they've not had a proper place to express themselves. Especially, I remember when I was in medical school, one of the things we were taught was that the women who come from the north, they don't really have a say. They're not involved in decision making and all that. So they will not come with the typical criteria that we say someone has when the person has depression. They will come with somatic symptoms, something crawling all over the body. Some people will call it a walker, and all those things. Yes, somatic symptoms. We call it somatization. So at the end of the day, what people end up doing is to respond or to react to the stressful situation. So how do you react when you're in a stressful situation? How do you react? Do you respond or do you react? So people have a lot of negative responses to stress. Some people, they will slap the other. If I slap you now, who do you think do you know who I am? People express themselves, in different ways. Of course, in this season that we are in, the common reactions to the economic downturn is to leave the country. To leave. Just japa, it will be easier over there. Even in my department presently, the number of people that have left my department over the last 2 years, not to talk of the whole hospital, people are leaving every day. So those are common ways in which, let's move the slides, that's the common way, the common reaction to stress. Some people are involved in theft. Some people are involved in fraudulent activities. Some people are carrying calabash, to make sacrifices so that they can, make more money. Some people are drinking more. Okay. The slides are not moving anymore. Okay. All right. So, unhealthy habits. All these are things that people go into. A young person met me at work, and we were talking. Why did he come to the hospital? I can't even remember, but in the course of the evaluation, I got to know that he takes some of these street drugs. But he wanted to stop. So how did you get here in the first place? He said he was taking those drugs so that he can be more productive. That there was a particular one of them that his brain would just clear. It would just be clear, and he would be able to remember things better. And so he wanted to show some form of achievements, but at the end of the day, it came back to haunt him. So people have unhealthy habits. But why do we deal with stress? So we're going to look at why we deal with stress and how we can leverage lifestyle activities as tools. Okay, let's move. We've passed this place now. Let's move it to why deal with stress. Okay, so why do we deal with stress? There are two major reasons. I think I already made mention of one before. So let me define mental health. So it will help us to link stress and why we have to deal with it. So mental health is able to cope with the normal stresses of life. So stress is normal, right? It's normal. We will always encounter it. But the person should now be able to cope with it and work productively and fruitfully, and also be able to make a contribution to the community. So if somebody is successful, has made a lot of money, but is just in their own corner, nobody is being, should I use the word blessed, or nobody's getting impacted by what they are doing, you can't say that that person is in a state of well-being. So your state of well-being, mental well-being, has to do with your own emotion and how you have impacted people within the family, within the community. So it's a two-way thing. The arch enemy of productivity, purpose, and potential, and even your marital fulfillment is poor stress management, because the stresses will come. Even when you were getting married, it was a stress. I remember when we got married, the first week, my husband broke down. And it must have been all the expectations, all the traveling back and forth, the pressure, running up and down, finances, but of course, it didn't last, but being able to cope during periods when we are stressed is very important, so that it doesn't become chronic and it doesn't become prolonged. I've already talked about the signs of stress, so I won't dwell on this again. But the second reason why we talk about stress, apart from the fact that stress is an arch enemy, is because it is a root cause of chronic disease. And this is one of the take-homes I want us, to have today. Now, stress it causes the release of the stress hormones. We have two major hormones, we call them, one is released during acute stress, one during chronic stress, adrenaline and cortisol. So adrenaline will come up if a lion enters this room. In fact, you will know that you have energy. You will know. In fact, your BP will go to 170, 120, not because you have high blood pressure, but because your body has released a lot of adrenaline into the circulation so that you can combat that threat that has come to your doorstep. So that's why the blood pressure that you take during that time is not going to be a reliable, blood pressure. So chronic diseases are fueled by some of these hormones because they result in a drop in our immunity. And that's when you now find people having an increased risk of hypertension, diabetes. Of course, there are so many other factors involved, not only the stress, but stress kind of modulates it and serves as a trigger. And if somebody has a chronic illness, it will not be well controlled if the person is in perpetual stress, or if the person is chronically stressed. Okay, so these are the chronic lifestyle diseases that are associated or can be triggered by stress: hypertension, heart disease, high cholesterol, type 2 diabetes. There are some cancers too. If someone is going through very severe stress, studies have shown that those people are more likely to actually come down with some cancers. I remember a woman who was thrown out of her husband's house, after investing so much in the home and the marriage. He married somebody else, and then she now became hypertensive. I think she became diabetic as well. And then all of a sudden we discovered that she had a breast lump. And by the time we checked the breast lump, it was a cancerous one. And unfortunately, it was a late presentation. So within a year, we lost her. So some of these things actually happen. We might not commonly encounter them, but those of us who are in the medical field, we are able to link those things. And then mental illness is also a chronic lifestyle-related disease, because all the other pillars of health can affect our mental well-being. So that's where you have anxiety, you have schizophrenia, you have bipolar illness, you have depression. That's where you have the panic disorder, generalized anxiety disorder. And so that brings us to the mental illness. Mental illness does not necessarily mean that you are going to be on the road looking lost, your hair. In fact, the hair that people put on these days, even before you get to the road, even in the classroom, you see all sorts of, hairstyles, and you wonder if this person is normal or not. So it's really not the hairstyle now that determines if someone has a mental illness. The way the person thinks, the way the person feels, and the way the person behaves. So any mental condition that will affect any of these three, that's what we call a mental illness. Over 60 million Nigerians suffer from mental illness, according to the Psychiatrists Association of Nigeria. And then there was a study from UNICEF that showed that 1 in 6 young Nigerians aged between 15 and 24 had depressive symptoms. And what were those depressive symptoms? They had little interest in doing things, or always felt worried, nervous, or anxious. The prevalence of depression is higher among people living with chronic disease, and that's why we must control our risk for chronic disease. Reduce your risk, because once you have been diagnosed with a particular illness, it has a way of just affecting you mentally. How come? Why am I having this condition? You know, especially if you have to visit the hospital over and over again. And then we need to also know how to manage our children. This is a poll that showed that Nigerian children feel under the most pressure to succeed globally, all over the world. Nigerian children, at a very young age, they just want to live. There was one film that was acted recently by, and they tried to represent people from the 3 major tribes in the country. Ademi, can you remember that film? These children that wanted to leave the country, they discovered some money. I think it was acted in Oyo town. They discovered that money. Yeah, Ijogbo, yes. Yes. But what interested me about that movie was that these were young people who really didn't have any, how will I say it now? They didn't have anyone who could help them per se. But even in that village where they were, they wanted to leave Nigeria. And they wanted to go through any means, even if it meant stealing what did not belong to them. Okay, so the risk factors for chronic diseases or lifestyle-related diseases have to do with our diet, our physical activity levels, the relationships that we have, our level of connectivity between we and our spouses, we and our children, we and our loved ones. All these things will determine whether the stress that you are going through will become chronic and will result in distress. Approximately 70% of visits to the primary care provider are related to stress. It's a vicious cycle, really. People come to the hospital because they are feeling one pain, one headache, or the other, but we've discovered that most of them are actually related to stress.